Imagine the sound of a handsaw cutting through oak, the rhythmic back and forth creating sawdust that falls like snow onto a workshop floor. There are no power tools here, no electrical hum, no machinery roar. Just the steady rasp of steel teeth biting into wood, guided by hands that learned this skill from a father who learned it from his father. This is morning in an Amish woodworking shop, and it's just one small piece of a way of life that has remained essentially unchanged for 300 years while the modern world transformed around it. Today we're going to spend time in an Amish village, watching craftsmen turn raw logs into furniture that will last generations, understanding why they choose to saw wood by hand when power tools exist, and discovering how a community maintains traditional skills and peaceful simplicity in the 21st century. This isn't a museum or a historical reenactment. This is real life, happening right now in communities across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and other states, where Amish families have chosen a different path, one of deliberate simplicity, incredible craftsmanship, and values that prioritize community and faith over convenience and speed. Let's start at the beginning of the process, with the trees themselves. Amish craftsmen don't buy their lumber from industrial suppliers. They source it locally, often from their own land or from neighboring farms. When a tree needs to come down, perhaps because it's diseased, storm-damaged, or simply because the landowner needs to clear space, the Amish see an opportunity. A tree that mainstream America might chip in a mulch or burn becomes raw material for furniture that will serve families for 100 years. The felling is done with hand tools. Crosscut saws, the long two-man saws with handles on each end, bite through tree trunks that might be 3 feet in diameter. 2 men work in rhythm, pushing and pulling, one pulling while the other lets the saw glide back, then reversing. It's exhausting work that can take an hour or more for a large tree, but it's also meditative. There's time to think, to talk, to work in partnership. The tree falls with a crash that echoes through the woods, and then the real work begins. The trunk is stripped of branches using axes and handsaws. The logs are measured and marked for cutting into manageable lengths. Then comes transportation, and this is where Amish ingenuity shows. Without trucks or tractors with engines, they use horse-drawn logging equipment. A team of draft horses, massive Belgian or Percheron breeds weighing over a ton each, can pull logs that would challenge a modern tractor. The logs are chained and dragged to a central collection point, then loaded onto wagons for transport to the sawmill. The sawmill itself is a fascinating blend of old and new, interpreted through Amish principles. Traditional Amish communities forbid connection to the electrical grid, seeing it as a tie to the outside world that could lead to dependence on non-Amish society and exposure to worldly influences through television and internet. But they're not opposed to technology itself, just to certain kinds that they believe threaten their way of life. So Amish sawmills often use hydraulic or pneumatic power, generated by diesel engines or even by large windmills. This allows them to use bandsaws and other cutting equipment without connecting to the grid. The logs are positioned on the sawmill bed, and the cutting begins. A large bandsaw blade, guided with incredible precision, slices through the log, converting round trunk into flat planks. The sawyer, usually a man who has been doing this for decades, reads the wood as he cuts. He sees the grain patterns, spots defects like knots or splits, and makes decisions in real time about how to cut each log to maximize usable lumber and minimize waste. The planks that come off the saw are rough and thick, still full of moisture from the living tree. They're stacked carefully in the lumber shed with spacers between each plank to allow air circulation. Here they will dry or season for months or even years depending on the thickness and the type of wood. Oak might need to dry for a year. Walnut could take even longer. This seasoning is crucial. Wood that isn't properly dried will warp, crack, and split when made into furniture. The Amish have time, and they're willing to wait for the wood to be ready rather than rushing the process with kiln drying like industrial furniture makers do. When the wood is finally seasoned, it moves to the furniture workshop. These workshops are remarkable places, usually large barn-like structures with excellent natural light from big windows and skylights. The smell hits you immediately, sawdust and wood oils, a scent that craftsmen say, gets into your clothes and never quite leaves. Hand tools hang on every wall, organized with precision. Planes, chisels, mallets, saws of every description, clamps, marking gauges, squares, levels. Many of these tools are old, passed down through generations, maintained and sharpened until the handles are worn smooth and the metal is thin but still perfectly functional. The furniture making begins with design, though the Amish would never call it that. They work from patterns and traditions that have been refined over generations. A dining table follows proportions that have proven themselves over centuries. A chair is built to dimensions that fit the human body based on generations of experience. There's very little innovation or experimentation in the design sense. Instead, there's perfection of established forms, making the traditional pieces as well as they can possibly be made. The craftsman starts by selecting boards for a piece. He looks at grain patterns, color, and character. The board for a tabletop need to match, their grain flowing together to create visual harmony. He marks the boards with a pencil, planning every cut to minimize waste and maximize the beauty of the wood. Then he begins dimensioning the lumber, taking rough planks and creating the precisely sized pieces needed for the furniture. Without power planers or joiners, this dimensioning is done by hand. A hand plane, that elegant tool that's essentially a sharp blade held at a precise angle in a wooden or metal body, is pushed along the board, shaving off thin ribbons of wood with each pass. It takes skill to plane a board flat and square. You have to read the grain, adjust the depth of the blade, use consistent pressure and angle. A board that's 8 feet long and 12 inches wide might require hundreds of passes with the plane to get it perfectly flat and smooth. The precision is remarkable. Using only hand tools, Amish craftsmen achieve tolerances that rival or exceed industrial machinery. 2 boards being joined for a tabletop will fit together so perfectly that the joint line is nearly invisible. When you run your hand across the joint, you can't feel where one board ends and the next begins. This isn't magic. It's skill developed over years of daily practice, combined with patience to work slowly and check your progress constantly. Joinery is where Amish furniture-making skill really shows. Joinery is how pieces of wood are connected to each other, and it determines how long furniture will last and how strong it will be. The Amish use traditional joinery methods that have proven themselves over centuries. Mortise and tenon joints, where projection on one piece fits into a hole in another, locked together so tightly that no glue is needed, though glue is usually added for extra strength. Dovetails, those interlocking finger-like joints you see in drawer construction, cut so precisely by hand that they fit together perfectly and will never pull apart even after 100 years of use. Creating these joints by hand is painstaking work. A mortise, the hole that receives the tenon, is cut with chisels. The craftsman marks the location carefully using a marking gauge that scratches precise lines into the wood. Then he uses a mallet and chisel to remove the wood bit by bit, checking frequently with a square to ensure the mortise is perfectly straight and perpendicular. The tenon, the projection that fits into the mortise, is cut with a saw, usually a tenon saw with fine teeth designed for precision. The fit has to be perfect, tight enough that the pieces hold together firmly, but not so tight that the wood splits when assembled. Dovetails are even more demanding. These angled, interlocking joints require extreme precision. The angles have to be exact. The spacing has to be consistent. Each pin and tail has to fit its corresponding socket perfectly. Amish craftsmen cut dovetails by hand using small saws and chisels, working slowly and carefully. A drawer with hand-cut dovetails might take several hours to construct, whereas industrial manufacturers use router jigs that cut dovetails in minutes. But the hand-cut dovetails have subtle variations that make each one unique, and they're often stronger than machine-cut versions because the craftsman adjusts each joint to the specific characteristics of the wood. As the furniture takes shape, it's assembled and then disassembled repeatedly. Dry fitting, assembling without glue, allows the craftsman to check every joint, ensuring everything fits perfectly before final assembly. Adjustments are made with planes and chisels, shaving tiny amounts of wood to perfect the fit. When everything is right, the final glue-up happens. Traditional wood glue, hide glue made from animal collagen, is sometimes used because it's reversible and has been proven over centuries. Modern wood glues are also used because they're stronger and more convenient while still meeting Amish standards for simplicity. Clamps hold everything together while the glue dries. An Amish workshop might have hundreds of clamps in various sizes, and a large piece like a dining table might use dozens of clamps simultaneously to ensure every joint closes tight and the assembly stays flat and true as the glue sets. The craftsman checks with squares and straight edges, making sure nothing has shifted or warped during glue-up. Once the glue is dry and the clamps are removed, the surface preparation begins. This is where good furniture becomes exceptional furniture. The entire piece is planed and scraped to create a perfectly smooth surface. A cabinet scraper, a simple piece of thin steel with a carefully created burr on the edge, is pushed across the wood, removing whisper-thin shavings that reveal the wood's true beauty. Hours of scraping remove any roughness left by sawing or planing, creating a surface that's glass-smooth to the touch. Sanding follows, though the Amish use far less of it than industrial furniture makers because their surface preparation with planes and scrapers has already made the wood so smooth. Sandpaper, starting with coarser grits and progressing to very fine grits, removes the last tiny scratches and burnishes the wood. All of this is done by hand. No orbital sanders or belt sanders, just sandpaper wrapped around a block and human effort. The finishing process is where the wood's character fully emerges. The Amish typically use simple, natural finishes that enhance the wood without hiding it. Linseed oil, a traditional finish made from flax seeds, penetrates the wood and brings out the grain's depth and color. It's applied with rags, rubbed into the wood in thin coats that build up slowly. Multiple coats over days or weeks create a finish that's beautiful, durable, and reparable. If the furniture gets scratched decades from now, more oil can be applied to refresh the finish. Some pieces receive shellac, a natural resin secreted by lac bugs and dissolved in alcohol. Shellac has been used for centuries and creates a harder, glossier finish than oil. It's applied with brushes in thin coats, each coat sanding lightly between applications to create a perfectly smooth surface. The Amish craftsman applies shellac with the same patience that characterizes all his work, never rushing, always allowing proper drying time, building the finish slowly to perfection. Wax is the final step, a paste wax made from beeswax and other natural waxes, rubbed into the finish by hand and buffed to a soft glow. The wax protects the finish and adds a final layer of beauty, bringing warmth and depth to the wood that makes you want to run your hands across it. The finished piece represents hundreds of hours of skilled labor. A dining table might have taken a craftsman 2 weeks of full-time work. A set of chairs could represent a month. A large hutch or armoire might be several months in the making. But the result is furniture that will outlive the maker, the buyer, and probably the buyer's grandchildren. Amish furniture regularly gets passed down through 3 or 4 generations, still solid, still beautiful, still perfectly functional. This durability isn't accidental. It's the result of using solid wood rather than plywood or particle board, of using traditional joinery that gets stronger over time rather than screws and nails that loosen, of applying finishes that can be renewed rather than veneers that can't be repaired. But it's also the result of care, of a craftsman who takes pride in his work and who knows that his name and his community's reputation rest on the quality of what he produces. The workshop isn't a solitary place. Amish craftsmen often work in family businesses where fathers work alongside sons, teaching skills through demonstration and practice. Younger boys, maybe 10 or 12 years old, start with simple tasks like sanding or applying finish under supervision. As they grow and learn, they take on more complex work, cutting joints and assembling pieces. By the time they're adults, they've internalized the skills through years of daily practice, and they're ready to produce furniture on their own. Women participate too, though usually in different aspects of the business. They might finish the furniture, applying oils and waxes. They handle sales, meeting with customers and taking orders. They manage the business side, keeping records and handling money. The workshop is a family enterprise where everyone contributes according to their abilities and the community's understanding of appropriate roles. The pace of work reflects Amish values. There's no rush to maximize production or increase efficiency. Quality takes priority over quantity. If a joint doesn't fit perfectly, it's remade rather than being forced together and hidden with putty and stain like industrial manufacturers might do. If a board has a defect that appears during construction, the piece is disassembled and the board replaced, even if this means days of additional work. The goal isn't to make as much furniture as possible. It's to make each piece as well as it can possibly be made. This approach creates furniture with character and soul that mass-produced items can never match. Each piece is slightly unique because it's made by hand. The grain patterns are never exactly the same. The proportions might vary slightly based on the specific boards available. The joinery, while following traditional patterns, has subtle variations that reflect the individual craftsman's hand. When you buy Amish furniture, you're buying something that was made by a specific person who cared about doing it right, not something that came off an assembly line operated by workers who never see the finished product. The sustainability of this approach is remarkable. The wood comes from local sources, often from trees that needed to be removed anyway. The production uses minimal energy, mostly human power with some hydraulic assistance. There's almost no waste. Scraps too small for furniture become firewood or animal bedding. Sawdust is used for bedding livestock or composted. Nothing is thrown away that can be used. The furniture lasts for generations, meaning that one Amish dining table might replace dozens of cheaply made tables that wear out and get discarded every few years. This is the peaceful life in an Amish village, at least the part that revolves around woodworking and craftsmanship. It's peaceful not because it's easy or relaxing. The work is physically demanding and requires intense concentration. It's peaceful because it's purposeful, because it connects the craftsman to materials and traditions and community in ways that modern industrial work often doesn't. When an Amish craftsman finishes a table, he can stand back and see something beautiful that he created with his own hands, using skills his grandfather taught him, from a tree that grew on land his family has farmed for generations. That connection to place, to tradition, to tangible creation provides a kind of peace that our fast-paced, digitized world struggles to offer.